Minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello. Ooh, here I am. And apologetic for having dropped you all. So, what's the word?
Quickly?
What? Quick. There's a better word than quickly. So, having a little snit fit and stopping the show yesterday. My apology is that I didn't give you guys time to contact me. And I'm sorry, because as soon as I knocked the show off, of course, I got like 25, 30 emails saying, I can hear you just fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. And so, forgive me. Pulled the trigger a little too fast. We have been told that things have been fixed. Believe me, the people at the very top did take notice yesterday, and I have been informed just moments ago that things should be fixed. What I need for you guys to do, and then I'm not going to say another word. If anyone ever believed that of me. When you're having issues, please let me know. And if it's just one email I'm getting, I'm going to assume the problem's on your end. If I get a ton of emails on the same thing, then I'll know. But we're trying desperately to make this a non-issue, because it pulls away, obviously, from my ability to do the show, my comfort level in even inviting a guest on, and also your. I wouldn't listen to a show that I had to, strain to hear and tell people to call. You want to check a phone call?
I want to see it.
Okay. Hey, somebody, call us right now so we can test to see if that phone... A big part of the problem were the phones. And so we haven't done a test. Number is 412-316-3381. I'll never remember it. 412-316-3381 if you want to just do a test call or actually have something to say. Oh, my apologies for my voice. I hope it hangs in there. I've been struggling physically since late last week. But God, there's so much in the news to talk about. And I was actually really looking forward to yesterday's show because I had a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't, the usual stuff. Hello, caller. Hi. Hi.
Hey, Lynn, it's Mike from D.C.
Hi.
Testing.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I hear you, and I hear every word you're saying. If you say some more words, I can
Okay.
get that concept.
And I'm hearing you fine, too. You want to get a little word in before you leave on any subject of your choosing?
No, not really, but thanks for making this all work out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, bye. Okay, so I think we're okay. Wow. Until we're not. Well, right now, yay! Okay, so let's just jump in. I don't even know where to start. There's so much stuff. When I had the fit yesterday, I was talking about a story. What the hell was it? Because I could... Huh?
Ice cream wars, but we also have another call.
Oh, the ice cream wars. I'll just do that real... Okay, take the call. Hello?
Good morning, Lynn.
Hi.
Hey, Lynn, Monkey Mike here calling.
Hi.
The phone, it's working now.
Uh-huh.
Hey,
Good.
yesterday I was freaking out. Everything seems to be... Oh, I'm not going to get into all these things. Leadership is a problem in the United States and everybody. And that's just the comment of the day.
Yeah.
Not just from you, but it just seems like, like they say in the Bible, I'm not a big Bible person, for the lack of vision, people perish. And unfortunately, I think we're in for some trouble if your man gets elected and...
My man, you ain't gonna... Don't you saddle me with him.
Well, I have to. I don't understand. He's calling the press. He's saying the press is bad for their asking questions about it.
I know.
No, he's not even bright enough to realize that that's the press's job to ask questions. I mean,
Not of him, apparently. No, so he really... that debacle of a news conference yesterday shows that he's incapable of pivoting, as they say, to a more statesmanlike and presidential posture. He's incapable of it. So what we saw yesterday is the name-calling, the thin-skinnedness, the inability to comprehend what a press does in a free society, what its role is, that its role is to ask uncomfortable questions of people in positions of power. That's the job. And the press has given him a free hand, so he hasn't been subject to much of it. And now, because of the criticism leveled at the press for their lousy job and for helping Donald Trump secure the nomination, they're now starting to do their job, and he doesn't know what the hell to do with it, except, call them sleazes and other names. It's really it's. I have to tell you, I was heartened yesterday because 6 months of that kind of performance is going to do him in.
Exactly. It's like you give enough rope, he's going to hang himself.
Yeah, I think so. I do believe that the majority of my country people will not tolerate Donald Trump representing them.
Exactly. So exactly. It's like when Bush, when we had Katrina. I think that was there's tipping points in life.
Yeah.
And Katrina was Bush's tipping point where we realized the emperor had no clothes, we had no money, we were lied to, and finally people realized the tipping point maybe yesterday came when he's trying to talk about the press and calling people a sleaze. I mean, what?
Yeah.
I mean, even a grade school newspaper has tried to, a fourth grader knows you try to write articles about your school, and sometimes there's things, or maybe the high school, there's somewhat controversial, but that's what the job of the...
No, yeah, exactly. And anyone in media, anyone who's had anything to do with newspapers or even television reporting, any reporting knows that you often anger the person you're covering. Because, well, they don't write the story, they don't do the story, and the job of a reporter is to, not do a puff piece, not be a PR organ. He doesn't get that. He doesn't get that they're not supposed to just swallow everything he says and spit it back out. And I kept thinking of, all that Hillary Clinton has endured by way of the press, right? And will continue to endure. And he hasn't felt one millionth of what she has endured. So you want a battle-tested, tough character in the Oval Office. She's wearing a skirt, although she never does.
Well, we all know women are much stronger than men, but that's in my opinion. Mean, she was in that meeting in Benghazi for 11 or 12 hours just straight.
Yeah, I know, and never lost her cool.
I mean, she's a 69-year-old woman.
Yeah, can you imagine him at that Benghazi hearing? Can you imagine?
It would be Well, it would be over quickly because he would just walk out of the room because he couldn't take it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how she could withstand that barrage. Any human being thrilled on a subject.
Yeah.
And 3 years ago, when she said she was partly responsible because she's a leader, and a leader has to take responsibility, and sometimes it's not your fault directly, but as a leader, you have to step up to the plate and say, hey,
right.
I'm responsible, but I can only go so far. The military has to take some responsibility for that, and she would say that. I mean, she's not the ultimate king, and you're like I say, your buddy last week telling the people in California, there's no drought here. No, what universe is he living on?
All right. Hey, thank you. I appreciate.
Thank you, Lynn. I'll talk to you later.
Bye. Okay. Yeah, thank you for your input. I'm getting more on audio. And I do agree, Dorothea. She says, I can hear you just fine, and I could hear the callers, except they sound a bit hollow and distant, which I also agree. I felt that way, too. So the quality of the audio is not great. And the curmudgeon Irishman, Ray, who we haven't heard from a lot. I'm glad to hear you're out there, Ray, getting pissed off by almost everything emanating from these quarters. He says, I can hear you just fine. And oh, no, that's not you. Ray, sorry, but your callers are about 20% of your volume. So he's still having that. If I turn up enough to hear them, you blast. But I'm not hearing that from the other people. So I don't know. Son of a bitch. Okay, let's just do the ice cream wars for a little bit because it's fun. And if you didn't hear the beginning of the show yesterday, turns out Mr. Softee and has a competitor in Manhattan, a breakaway group. I think they used to be Mr. Softee drivers, and they call themselves now New York Ice Cream. And there's a turf war going on with the ice cream trucks in Manhattan that is scary. It's scary. Threats of violence, even some violence. Here's one of the New York ice cream truck drivers saying, from 34th to 60th, river to river, that's ours. You'll never see a Mr. Softee truck here. And if you do, there'll be problems, and you won't see them very long. I mean, I can... The guy who heads Mr. Softee has urged his drivers once more into the fray. He says, I want you to retake Manhattan. And the drivers look at him and they say, you friggin' retake Manhattan. I'm not going out there. It's scary. So here's a guy who's a Softee truck dispatcher. He says, if one of my drivers goes to Midtown, they'll bring the other guys, they'll bring their trucks in and surround them. A whole bunch of guys. They'll start banging on the windows. They'll start threatening. So, it turns out that this has happened before. Who knew? I did not know this. Ice cream wars have gone on in New York before. In 1969, ladies and gentlemen, a Mr. Softee driver was kidnapped by rivals from another ice cream truck. And he was kidnapped and his truck was blown up. Okay? And let that be a lesson to yous. Okay. In 2004, a couple that were selling cones they were in their 60s, why that's important, I don't know, were ambushed by competitors who beat them with a wrench into critical condition. Okay. And in 2010, a brawl caught on video showed two drivers near Columbus Circle exchanging punches before one man pushed the other's face into a planter. So, anyway, we'll leave the last word to the thickly muscled, heavily tattooed Mr. Softee driver, Adam Vega. Let me tell you about this business. Every truck's got a bat inside. Just sort of turns the whole idea of the little Mr. Softee truck with its annoying music and its summertime relief for the little kiddies. It really just sort of turns it all around in your head, which I love. I had something else that was weird. Oh, yeah, but these we've seen before. But for some reason, the New York Times the other day revisited the crazy translations that you encounter in China of English. And, I mean, you can do these things all day and night. They specifically, though, zeroed in on restaurants in China, and the ones that also want to cater to an international crowd, so they have their menus in Chinese, they have their menus in English, and here are just some of the possibility. It must be the Chinese, or Mandarin, I guess is the major, is very difficult to translate into English, because I don't understand how you keep getting these absurd. Here are the ones. I'll give you a few. These are all things you can order on the menus that right out there in English. Here's one of my favorite. The smell of urine dry noodles. Man, it does really make you hungry, doesn't it? Let's see. Oh, here's one. The hand that grasps the cowboy bone. What? And here it is, fried swarm. There's a sign outside one, and they say the government's no better at it. They've got a sign that says, "Beware wallet, carefully slide." Okay, and just a few other items from the menu. Beef cat's ear. Well, that's probably an actual, that probably is a correct translation. Beef cat's ear. And how about a noodle dish in broth that is called sauce on my grandma? And in Beijing, the few wheelchair-accessible bathrooms that are available are marked with the official, handicapped sort of logo-ish thing. And under it, in English, it says, deformed person. Excuse me. Oh, man. So, I have, if you want to talk about the gorilla, I'll talk about the gorilla. But, and back in the day when I was doing a 3-hour radio show, I would probably have already talked about the gorilla for about 4 or 5 hours. Oh, dear God. But unless somebody brings it up, I'm perfectly willing to, but it depresses me. It depresses me how the social media now runs the show, and how the meanest people get to sort of move the conversation. And I really am finding it intolerable how everything that happens in our world has to be the fault of the blame, the finger pointing that goes on, when nothing is ever. Remember when there used to be things called accidents? No, I'm serious. Accidents. Remember those? People accepted that life was, a little unpredictable, and stuff happened. When I often tell the story that when I was a 7-year-old, I had a horrific bicycle accident that almost took my life, and to this day still affects my health, which is a ridiculous and long story, but still very much so. Resulted in many surgeries, and the threat of cancer for the rest of my life, blah, blah, blah. This was an accident. If that accident were to have happened today, there would have been lawsuits. My parents would have sued the bicycle shop or the bicycle maker. I could have sued my parents. It was one thing after another. Nobody ever even thought in those terms. It was an accident. Okay, so now let's get serious. Maybe some of you have already read this, and I don't usually do this. I think you'll agree that I'm going to subject you to a full recital of a op-ed piece, a full recital. And this appeared in the Washington Post. It's gotten a lot of attention, but this is a guy who is very carefully and clearly saying what I have been attempting to say for a long time about Donald Trump and his connection to fascism. Robert Kagan, the guy who wrote it, is with the Brookings Institution, and also a pretty, I guess he's a contributing columnist for the Washington Post. The headline of his piece is, "This is how fascism comes to America." And I really think, he's done this very well. And I've attempted to, but if you don't mind, here we go. And if my voice doesn't hold out, we'll have to scrap it. Here we go. The Republican Party's attempt to treat Donald Trump as a normal political candidate would be laughable were it not so perilous to our republic. If only he would mouth the party's conservative principles, all would be well. But of course, the entire Trump phenomenon has nothing to do with policy or ideology. It has nothing to do with the Republican Party either, except in its historic role as incubator of this singular threat to our democracy. Trump has transcended the party that produced him. His growing army of supporters no longer cares about the party because it did not immediately and fully embrace Trump, because a dwindling number of its political and intellectual leaders still resist Trump. The party is regarded with suspicion and even hostility by his followers. Their allegiance is to him and him alone. And the source of this allegiance? We're supposed to believe that Trump's support stems from economic stagnation or dislocation. Maybe some of it does. But what Trump offers his followers are not economic remedies, because his proposals change daily. Excuse me. What he offers is an attitude, an aura of crude strength and machismo, a boasting disrespect for the niceties of the democratic culture that he claims and his followers believe has produced national weakness and incompetence. His incoherent and contradictory utterances have one thing in common. They provoke and play on feelings of resentment and disdain intermingled with bits of fear, hatred, and anger. His public discourse consists of attacking or ridiculing a wide range of others: Muslims, Hispanics, women, Chinese, Mexicans, Europeans, Arabs, immigrants, refugees, whom he depicts either as threats or as objects of derision. His program, such as it is, consists chiefly of promises to get tough with foreigners and people of non-white complexion. He will deport them, bar them, get them to knuckle under, make them pay up and shut up. That this tough guy, get mad and get even approach has gained him an increasingly large and enthusiastic following has probably surprised Trump as much as anyone else. Trump himself is simply and quite literally an egomaniac. But the phenomenon he has created and now leads has become something larger than him and something far more dangerous. Republican politicians marvel at how he has tapped into a hitherto unknown swath of the voting public. But what he has tapped into is what the founders most feared when they established this democratic republic, and that is the popular passions unleashed, the mobocracy. Conservatives have been warning for decades about government suffocating liberty, but here is the other threat to liberty that de Tocqueville and even the ancient philosophers warned about, that the people in a democracy, excited, angry, and unconstrained, might run roughshod over even the institutions created to preserve their freedoms. As Alexander Hamilton watched the French Revolution unfold, he feared in America what he saw play out in France, that the unleashing of popular passions would lead not to greater democracy, but to the arrival of a tyrant riding to power on the shoulders of the people. This phenomenon has arisen in other democratic and quasi-democratic countries over the past century, and it has generally been called fascism. Fascist movements, too, had no coherent ideology, no clear set of prescriptions for what ailed their society. National Socialism was a bundle of contradictions, united chiefly by what and who it opposed. Fascism in Italy was anti-liberal, anti-democratic, anti-Marxist, anti-capitalist, and anti-clerical. Successful fascism was not about policies, but about the strong man. It's about the leader, il duce, der Führer, in whom could be entrusted the fate of the nation. Whatever the problem, he's going to fix it. Whatever the threat, internal or external, he will vanquish it. And it was unnecessary for him to have to explain how he was going to do it. Today we see it with Putinism, which also has nothing to do with belief or policy, but is about the tough man who single-handedly defends his people against all threats, domestic and foreign. To understand how such movements take over a democracy, one only has to watch the Republican Party today. These movements play on all the fears, vanities, ambitions, and insecurities that make up the human psyche. In democracies, at least for politicians, the only thing that matters is what the voters say they want. A mass political movement is thus a powerful, and to those who would oppose it, frightening weapon. When controlled and directed by a single leader, it can be aimed at whomever the leader chooses. If someone criticizes or opposes the leader, it doesn't matter how popular or admired that person has been. He might be a famous war hero, John McCain. But if the leader derides the hero and ridicules his sacrifice, the followers laugh and jeer. He might be the highest-ranking elected guardian of the party's most cherished principles, Speaker of the House. But if he hesitates to support the leader, he faces political death. In such an environment, every political figure confronts a stark choice. Get right with the leader and his mass following, or get run over. The human race in such circumstances breaks down into predictable categories, and Democratic politicians are the most predictable. There are those whose ambition leads them to jump on the bandwagon. They praise the leader's incoherent speeches as wisdom, hoping he will reward them with a plum post in the new order. There are those who merely hope to survive. Their consciences won't let them curry favor so shamelessly, so they mumble their pledges of support like the victims in Stalin's show trials, perhaps not realizing that the leader and his followers will get them in the end anyway. A great number will simply kid themselves, refusing to admit that something very different from the usual politics is afoot. Let the storm pass, they insist, and then we can pick up the pieces, rebuild, get back to normal. Meanwhile, don't alienate the leader's mass following. After all, they're voters and will need to be brought back into the fold. As for Trump himself, let's shape him, advise him, steer him in the right direction, and not incidentally save our political skins. What these people, he's talking about the Republican Party now, what these people do not or will not see is that once in power, Trump will owe them and their party nothing. He will have ridden to power despite the party, catapulted into the White House by a mass following devoted only to him. By then, that following will have grown dramatically. Today, less than 5% of eligible voters have voted for Trump. But if he wins the election, his legions will likely comprise a majority of the nation. Imagine the power he would wield then. In addition to all that comes from being a leader of a mass following, he would also have the immense powers of the American presidency at his command. The Justice Department, the FBI, the intelligence services, the military. Who would dare to oppose him then? Certainly not a Republican Party that laid down before him even when he was comparatively weak. And is a man like Trump, with infinitely greater power in his hands, likely to become more humble, more judicious, more generous, less vengeful than he is today, than he has been his whole life? Does vast power uncorrupt? This is how fascism comes to America. Not with jackboots and salutes, although there were those salutes and a whiff of violence, but with a television huckster, a phony billionaire, a textbook egomaniac tapping into popular resentments and insecurities, and with an entire national political party out of ambition or blind party loyalty or simply out of fear falling into line behind him. It's the way I see it too. We cannot let that happen. And as I said, I was heartened by yesterday and his performance. And also something yesterday, some of the testimony that has happened in the Trump University case, which, by the way, he has gone after the federal judge hearing the case, which could get him held in contempt. I mean, he takes on people who can potentially get him back. Of course, if the judge were to go after him, that would only, as everything seems to, accrue to his benefit with his followers. But there is a front page piece about some of the testimony of the people who fell for the Trump University stuff, and it's hard to read because it shows Donald Trump as a businessman to be unscrupulous as all get out, and literally ordering the salespeople that are supposed to be selling this university to people to prey upon the elderly and uneducated. And as one person who worked for him said, it was just a fraudulent scheme. And we were to separate these people from their money. It's so tawdry. And I think what Donald Trump maybe didn't realize is that if he were to win, which he has done, win the nomination, that then he would be subject to the same scrutiny that every candidate for the White House gets subjected to. So it's just beginning for him. And his pathetic appearance yesterday, the name-calling and the defensiveness and the absolute ignorance of what news media and what the job is. The job is not to ask softball questions. The job is to ask tough questions. And our job as voters, as citizens, is to watch. To watch what information is elicited by the press being surrogates for us. We can't question Donald Trump directly. So they're asking questions that maybe not all of us would ask, but a whole bunch of people like to know. And in a free and open democratic society, someone who would lead that society has got to be able to survive that gauntlet. He is, I suggest, I think, incapable of surviving it. Gigi writes, I'm so glad you're back today. I'm listening on my iPhone and it's working. So appreciative that you framed the gorilla incident exactly for what it was, an accident. I'm so tired of the blame game. So, okay, time to talk about Trump. Sigh. Enjoy the sunshine. John. Oh, wait, I got to get your first one, John. Yeah. Kagan is a big-time neocon. He founded the Project for a New American Century and was a big pusher of the invasion of Iraq. Not someone I think you'd care for. No, I don't care for that. I think, though, his dissection of what is going on in the Republican Party and the threat that a Trump candidacy proposes, I think he's absolutely right on the money. And you're suggesting to me that because Kagan and I would not agree on a whole bunch of other stuff, that we're not capable of agreeing on some things? See, that's what's wrong with us now. We just keep throwing babies out with bathwater. It's just like, oh no, sorry, he said that. I'm totally opposed to that, so I will not listen to another word he says. If you've got a problem with what he wrote in that piece, this is how fascism comes to America, then respond to the piece, not to other positions he has. Okay? That's fair. That's totally fair. I'm sick of the black and white shit. He's on our side. I can't listen to him. He supported the Iraq war. I can't this. I mean, come on. We're complicated human beings. Sometimes people who don't agree on 80% of the stuff agree on 20% of the stuff. Do you not work with them on the 20? Well, we don't anymore in this country, and look what it does to us. I know who Robert Kagan is. It did not seem important to me. All I wanted to do was share his observation of what is happening, because it absolutely, and if you've listened to me before, dovetails with what I have been saying, what I think. And I thought it was very elegantly done. We have a call. Hello?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Hey, you're talking about getting along with the Republicans. That's like this free trade. I don't like it, but if they can make it fair trade, I could go along with it, you know. I mean, I don't have no say in it or anything, but you have to compromise to a certain extent to get anything out of it. Don't you agree?
You know what? You're going to have to repeat, because that audio, I was distracted.
I was saying about like free trade.
Yeah, free trade.
I don't like it, but if it was a fair trade agreement, then I can agree with it.
If it were not free trade, but what?
If free trade was a fair trade.
Oh.
I mean, if it was more fair, if we were getting something out of it, we seem like it's lopsided.
It does.
That's the only problem.
And it has cost.
Because I know there's callers that call in and they're free traders, and then they don't want to tax the rich, which I can understand. But the problem is they don't pay what they're supposed to pay.
No.
That's the problem.
No, the little people are carrying this country.
Right.
Yeah.
And the taxes, I can understand everybody's got to pay. I know I said I wish they'd pay all of them, but that's not realistic. But the problem is they don't pay what they're supposed to pay. Like GE, what do they pay? I mean, there's a big corporation there. When I talk about million people that are rich, I'm talking about big rich corporations and that. I'm not talking about like individuals that are rich.
Well, speaking of the rich not paying, I mean, the reason I think that Trump doesn't want us to see his income tax returns is probably he ain't paying much of anything.
Right. And that's
it.
Not right either.
And because, I mean, they do have returns from way back in the 80s or something, 70s or 80s, where he paid absolutely zero, despite the fact that he was making more than you and I will ever see. So that's what that's about, and none of this stuff's going to go away on him. And the trade issue, it's hard to deal with because, again, you're dealing with a global, a planetary system.
Right.
And in that regard, nation states are, everybody's sort of desperately trying to stake out some kind of territory that benefits them without, I guess, This is the kind of thing that ends up leading to wars if you don't handle it right?
Right.
I mean, the slightest little, okay, let's just tweak this a little bit, has huge ramifications. So I don't know, but I will say that I do not think the policymakers have given much thought when they do these things to what is the impact on the human being, on the human beings who are dislocated.
I don't think Trump realizes that he might be the president, but he's not going to change that free trade just because he says he will.
Well, but that's what his answer to anything is. I'll take care of it. And he's never explained how anything gets done.
He has to deal with Congress. I mean, people should know that.
I believe he represents a threat that has to be taken extraordinarily seriously. And even if in the back of my head I think there's no way this guy can win, the fact is he's just got one more hurdle between him and the White House, and that's Hillary Clinton. And she's not a great candidate, as we know. I think she'd be a fine president, but she's not a great candidate. And he's beaten everybody he's come up against. So anyone who thinks that they can sit on their hands in this one is out of their minds. And I will blame anybody who either doesn't vote, who votes for anybody but Hillary, because a protest vote, a write-in vote, a third-party vote is without a doubt a vote that helps Trump. So that's all I'm going to say, and whatever. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Okay, and John says he's the one who said Kagan's a neocon. And he goes on, Kagan and his fellow neocons benefit big time from this fascism he now complains about. Look, yeah, we can have that discussion, but is he wrong in this? Is that piece incorrect? Tell me one thing in that piece that you think is not a correct assessment of his vision of what can happen with Donald Trump and what we're seeing now, how it plays out, how, given the threat, I said it would be very interesting to watch. This is like a moment when you can get a pretty good reading on someone's character. And watching the guys who jump on his bandwagon, watching the guys who are trying to straddle the fence, watching the guys that say, I will never vote for this guy, despite the fact that I am a lifelong Republican. Looking at the choices people make says something, because Donald Trump is a danger to our republic. And if you don't agree with that, well, then you're not going to agree with Kagan's words here. But I think, I would think if you think Kagan's such a fascist, he would love Trump. He says the GOP has long been a fascist party. Well, okay. Whatever. Henry writes, Henri, regarding the gorilla, my feeling is that the park put both the child and the gorilla in danger by not securing the habitat properly. An accident, yes, but it could have been avoided. Well, I will agree with you there. The fact that a 3-year-old child breached this barrier says the barrier is for shit. I'm sorry. Right. It just is. I don't care if it passed muster with all the proper authorities. If it's breachable, by a 3-year-old, unless the kid is an engineering genius in the making, that is not a great barrier. So in that regard, I agree that obviously there's something wrong with the barrier. Obviously. And we've got a caller. Hello.
Hey, Lynn.
Hi.
John from Greensburg here.
Uh-huh.
I certainly agree with you that, even though Kagan is a neocon, we should take all the help we can get in stymieing the rise of Donald Trump, who, I can't believe I'm saying this, potentially occupying the highest seat of power in the world. That being said, the Republican Party for the past 30 years has been encouraging Trump's sort of cretinism.
Absolutely.
Vince Foster didn't come out of nowhere. There were actual congressional hearings on the suicide of Vince Foster, attempting to implicate the Clintons somehow back in the 1990s. I mean, the idiot. People think about Trump being the birther in chief against President Obama just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And that also didn't come, that didn't arise spontaneously. There were Republican congressmen, such as the moron Louis Gohmert from Texas, who...
Well, there were congressmen who not...
On the floor of Congress.
Yeah. I mean, there was a huge bunch of Republicans who not only wouldn't correct anybody saying that Trump was... It's not just the birth certificate. It's the Muslim stuff. The fact that he was, not the religion he said he was. That he was not the nationality he said he was. And you're right. The Republican Party has, for years, trafficked in a lot of lies.
Lunacy.
Yeah. But here it is. But they birthed this, and I think Kagan's point that is to the point is that they birthed something they can't control. And that's the danger.
They oppose it. The only reason they oppose him, they would have been fine with a Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
They would have been fine with a man who is a borderline theocrat who is a shameless opportunist and con artist, and who was educated at the finest schools in the land, but promoted anti-intellectualism, know-nothingism, played off class division and prejudices, as long as he bought into their economic message and served the same masters they do. They would have been fine with a candidate like that.
They wouldn't have been. They would have been unhappy because they really didn't like him, and they weren't sure they could control him either, Cruz. And you realize that none of these people have gone away. So if Trump goes down in November, who is this party going to put forward in 4 years? They'll all be back.
That's where if Trump is defeated, as we hope Trump is defeated, the one thing I'll thank him for, I may have to write him a letter personally, is that he completely cleared out the Republican so-called deep bench. He really did.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, I don't know. He's, in that regard, done a service, but at this point, he is a dangerous, dangerous man and must be brought down. That's all.
Absolutely.
That's
and
all.
I completely, I'm going to share your absolute disdain for anyone who says they're going to cast a protest vote, a third-party vote, write in Bernie. Look, we've discussed how much, Hillary Clinton is a flawed candidate. But the analogy I'll use is that if you were at a restaurant and you are, let's say you're some stipulation that you have to order dessert and you want triple chocolate cake, but you're told, sorry, the choices are you get plain vanilla ice cream or you get a bowl of stale jawbreakers that will crack your teeth. Okay? And no matter what else you try to order, or if you refuse to order, something's going to come to your table, one of those two choices, and you're going to have to eat one of them. Well, one's a sane choice. One's an insane choice. So that's what we got. That's what we have choose from. You know, there's no other option. Those are the two options. We're going to live under one of those.
Well, any vote,
yeah,
people just need to realize that any vote not given to Hillary is something that helps Donald Trump. It's just that clear. It's simple, you know, just you have a bunch of marbles. Here's one for Trump. Here's one for Hillary. Here's one for Trump. Here's one for Hillary. Oh, here's one. And I'm putting it over here. If it's a tight race, people who don't vote for her are going to cost this nation, I don't know, its future, its reputation, it's everything.
You know, any Republican candidate is going to have a floor. He's going to start off with a certain base of support. I mean, look, 1 in 4 people, you know, supported Nixon while he was being, you know, ousted from office.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 4 people.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Still supported the cataclysmic moron George W. Bush as he was leaving office. You know, I think Trump starts out with 40 to 45%.
I'll give you 40, but I don't know.
I don't think he's going to go. You know, I think when you know, I think that.
Let's hope.
It could be a strong. I mean, it could be a clear victory, but he's not as weak as so many liberals seem to.
No, I agree. You cannot, even if you think he's weak, don't act like he's weak. Act, because we've got to ensure. I am going to assume he can win. That's the only way I'm going forward here, because I have got to beat him. And anyone who sits on their hands and thinks, well, and I don't even. No, you're going. If he wins, it's on you then. Hey, I got to move on. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye. Just want to get. Mike in Philly says, I'm not a supporter of Trump at all, of course, but here is my take. Trump has been interviewed by the celebrity media for years, or the ass-kissers at Fox News. He's been thrown softball after softball for years, so he thinks that's the way it should be. The non-national media, in my opinion, have become soft. No one asks tough questions anymore. Well, it's a little strong, because some people do. There are still some people out there in media wearing little reporter hats that are serious. The media is afraid to ask a tough question and get barred from events. And in the shrinking world of print and television media, that could kill your career. No one asked a tough question to Roethlisberger when the rape allegation happened. That's true. And why? Because you don't dare get barred from the Steelers facility. Your career'd be over. And then look at the Paterno scandal. Paterno wanted to address the media. The PSU board wouldn't allow him because they knew he was asked softball questions for years, and this time the national media would be there to eat him up. So Trump has ascended to national media now, and they can be tough. He's been dealing with small-time media for years, media that kisses his ass to get him on their show or in their paper. I don't want... Okay. There's something. But if yesterday was any indication of his ability to handle the heat, then this is a guy who's not going to make it. Thank God. I don't want to touch on the grill incident anymore, but why has no one actually shown us where the boy went through or over or something? I don't know. Why hasn't a local reporter gone to the zoo and shown us video of the area where he crawled through? So many times I find myself screaming follow-up questions while watching the news that no one asks. And maybe they're afraid to. That is what we have become, afraid to ask. Well, they weren't yesterday, and they kept coming, and knowing that to ask him a question was to face ridicule. But I think media now know we're watching them. And so you will see much more, I hope, serious, professional probing of Donald Trump than we have thus far had. You certainly see it in the newspapers. Between the New York Times and the Washington Post, they're doing their due diligence. Of course, those are things that any Trump supporter would say, lies, lies, lies. I won't even look. All I have to hear is New York Times, Washington Post, and I know it's not true. Well, I don't know. There's an article by a German political editor for one of their major newspapers. Excuse me. And he talks about the West's Weimar moment. So over there in Germany, they're looking, and while he says Trump is not Hitler, he does all kinds of, but this is like. He says some people imagine that Hitler somehow sneaked up on Germany, that too few people understood the threat he posed. And this guy says, no, many mainstream politicians recognized the danger of Hitler, but they failed to stop him. Some didn't want to. The conservative parties and the nobility believed the little hothead could serve as their useful idiot. That as chancellor, he would be contained by a squad of reasonable ministers. And then this guy said in the left wing just kept fighting with itself and did nothing that stopped the threat. They never came together. He says, are we at another Weimar moment? Well, the 2008 financial crisis and the subsequent global recession were nowhere nearly as painful as the Great Depression, which led to the horrors in the economy in Germany, which led to the unrest there, blah, 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 blah. But this guy says the shattering of banks, real estate markets, and governments in the wake of the crash left tens of thousands of people at sea, angry at the institutions that had failed them, and above all, the politicians who claimed to be in charge. That same kind of thing is playing out now. And in America and in Europe, the rise of these right-wing, anti-establishment movements is a symptom of the cultural shock brought on by globalized post-modernity, similar to the 1930s. There's a lot of folks in the world that believe that our democracies have somehow gone too far. You see that in the Republican Party. They don't believe in equality for all. Not when you start talking about the people they don't want in the tent. And if you think that what's feeding the Trump thing is not a lot of racism, not a lot of homophobia, not a lot of just rage against liberal, democratic values, then you ain't paying attention. So this German says, today, as in the 1930s here in Germany, we are seeing the failure of the liberal democratic mainstream to respond to serious challenges, even those that threaten its very existence. So this guy's putting it on us that we ain't fighting back in a way that is getting a foothold, that makes sense. I don't know. Make no mistake. This is how fascism comes to America. And I don't care if a neocon wrote it. He's dead on. Have a great day. Go Pens! See you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.